Ever seen a train crash that looks too unreal to be true? Like something from a movie or video game? Let's review some of the most unbelievable rail accidents, from full-speed collisions to close calls where everyone somehow walked away. Some trains are built like tanks and hold up better than you'd expect. Others fall apart with one wrong move. Stick around and discover some of the most dangerous trains and those built to survive the worst. Number 12. Tallerdig train collision. What do you get when two trains say "after you" at the same time? You get a scenic Welsh rail journey that turns into Final Destination, Rural Edition. On October 21st, 2024, in Wales, there were two trains, one loop and one massive misunderstanding. What should have been a routine passing maneuver at Tallerdig turned into a slow-motion disaster with real consequences. The westbound train to Aberystwyth was supposed to wait its turn in the loop. Instead, it said, "Nah, I'm good," and just kept going. Meanwhile, the eastbound train to Shrewsbury was coming the other way, on the same track, right on schedule. So naturally, very close to the loop, the two met face to face, like a Tinder date, but with more twisted metal. Initial investigations indicate that at the time of the impact, the Aberystwyth train was traveling at breakneck speed, and the Shrewsbury train had slowed considerably. Before the impact, the driver of the Shrewsbury to Aberystwyth train had entered the saloon to warn passengers of the impending collision. 15 people were taken to hospital with injuries, 4 of them serious, but none were described as life-threatening or life-changing. One passenger subsequently died. He was reported to have had a heart attack. The train already had a traumatic past. It crashed into a vehicle at a level crossing back in 2008. 7 months in repairs, only to come back for a sequel it never asked for. If you were about to take a train which has been involved in multiple mishaps, maybe you could just take the bus. Instead of 7 months of repairs, maybe they should have just turned it into a museum exhibit. We've seen a fatal accident on a train that needs either a brake or a therapist. This next incident was almost fatal. Number 11. Goththingberg train derails after slamming into bus. In the Swedish city of Goththingberg, the second largest city in the country, a public bus got stuck on the train tracks. A local resident, a man named Freddie Persson, was there to film the whole accident. Freddie just wanted his morning commute to get to work, and instead got a front row seat to an epic showdown. His recording maybe went viral before the fire department even arrived. But for a little bit of luck, things could have been very different. With chemicals like ethylene oxide and hydrogen peroxide available, this could have been a chemistry experiment nobody signed up for. They were all one spark away from becoming a crater, the newest tourist attraction in Goththingberg. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind a little. It was March 8, 2020, around 7:30 a.m. Freddie was waiting for his bus when he could tell something was wrong on the railroad. The bus he needed was stuck on the tracks, and a train was fast approaching. And next thing you know, the train obliterated the bus and kept moving. The bus did a complete 180-degree turn when the train hit. Debris flew in every direction, and it looked like the train was about to derail toward Freddie. In addition, there was probably a spark that ignited the fuel. According to reports, the train partially derailed further up the tracks. Following the collision, a large area was cordoned off in eastern Goththingberg, with Swedish authorities warning of a high risk of explosion. At the time of occurrence, the trains were being reconnected in the railway yard, but an area close to the scene of the accident was cordoned off, and several buildings were evacuated, including a school and a nursery school. Trains were also prevented from passing the scene of the accident, Saveness Marshalling Yard, which affected traffic to and from Gothenburg to Stockholm and the surrounding areas. One train car was carrying ethylene oxide, a toxic and flammable gas, and another hydrogen peroxide, and fire services initially warned of a very high risk of explosion. Thankfully, nobody was on the bus when the train tore through. Of the 50 people on board the train, only a few suffered minor bumps and bruises. Number 10. Train crash sent vehicles flying in Oklahoma. Thackerville is a sleepy little town in southern Oklahoma, right on the Texas border. If you've ever ridden the Amtrak from Fort Worth to Oklahoma City, then most likely you would have passed through it. On October 16th of 2021, the conductor on Amtrak train 822 saw something up ahead. A fully loaded car hauler had gotten stuck, and there was no stopping the speeding train. Someone in the neighborhood driving behind the truck recorded the violent crash. The sheriff's office arrived to find the driver and his dog shaken up, but okay. 4 people on the train suffered minor injuries and were treated at a local hospital. The crash looked like something out of a video game. As the train plowed through, the car flew very high. The tracks also elevated off the main road. Probably the semi-truck bottomed out and couldn't drive over the hump. It also looked like the crossing arms were stuck on the truck. However, if the driver wanted to move, he could have just driven through. 4 train passengers were injured on Amtrak train 822 running between Fort Worth, Texas and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The collision occurred around 7 p.m. The Amtrak train struck the semi-truck on BNSF railway tracks near Thackerville, Oklahoma. Reports are that 4 passengers suffered injuries. At the time of the collision, there were 100 passengers and crew members on the Amtrak train. The driver of the semi-truck remained in good condition, although he was traumatized from the incident. The semi-truck appeared to get stuck on the tracks due to the dangerous elevated or humped crossing. In the video of the collision, it was speculated that a person was trying to get the train conductor's attention. However, the impact was so intense that it caused the front of the locomotive to derail and cause damage to the rail bed. The crossing has also been the site of a previous collision with a BNSF train that also struck another vehicle stuck on the track. Although no one was injured, the repeated incidents show no sign of potential improvement. This issue is not exclusive to semi-trucks, as a similar collision happened to a North Carolina teen on April 22, 2022. While she got out of the car and remained unharmed, her car was inevitably flipped due to the collision. Reports of similar incidents happening in Georgia and Delaware in recent times confirm that the possibility of getting stuck on tracks is higher than commonly assumed. Never stop at a train track. Assume a train could be coming. We'll find out why in the next accident. Number 9. Train crashes into 18-wheeler in Richmond, Texas. It seems like semi-trucks just love getting stuck on train tracks in the South. Our next crash happened in Richmond, Texas, a small city outside of Houston. On May 5th of 2021, an 18-wheeler carrying cases of bottled water was traveling through Richmond when it got caught on the tracks. A local man was standing at the intersection of 2nd Street and South Calhoun. He was wise enough to take a few steps back and record the scene. The train was like a hot knife through butter. It sliced the truck in half, but thankfully nobody got hurt. Drivers gamble with their lives too often. You could almost wonder if they had 9 lives. It was pure luck that no one died in the incident. The driver had no business being on the rails. Whether it is a case of hesitation, a mechanical failure, or anything else, stopping on the tracks is almost a death sentence. When the crossing arm barrier is already down, it signifies that a train is close, maybe seconds away. In emergencies, it is permitted for drivers to plow through. This time, though, the driver froze. The police said the semi-truck was carrying about 44,000 pounds of bottled water. Following the incident, plastic littered the surrounding area, and it took them several days to clean up. Like the Thackerville crash, the crossing arm was down and touching the truck. Maybe the driver thought the train would stop in time and didn't want to break the arm. Well, rule number 1. Never assume a moving train will stop. Moreover, hoping that the train would brake is a false hope. Even when there is emergency braking, you can't just halt suddenly. The train needs over a mile to come to a stop. Never stop on tracks. Just keep moving. Always assume a train could be coming. A road user or a train, who should give up right of way? We'll find out next. Number 8. Train hits truck that failed to stop in Zboczen, Poland. In the small town of Zboczen in western Poland, a truck driver learned a valuable lesson about speed limits. On January 14, 2020, he was driving through the Polish backcountry with an excavator on the flatbed. He came around the bend too hot and couldn't stop in time for a passing train. At first, he seemed to be innocently crossing the tracks. Then, bam, a high-speed train zips by and takes them out. However, CCTV footage from a different angle puts the whole story in perspective. The driver approached way too fast. He then had to slam the brakes on noticing disaster. However, the truck was too heavy to stop in time. Then the driver had to make a quick judgment call. Should he stop and risk landing in the tracks? Or should he speed up and try to outrun the train? Your guess is as good as mine. He chose to speed ahead. The train smashed the flatbed and spun it 90 degrees. Imagine being in one of those cars and watching this whole thing happen. Thankfully, out of the 150 people on board, only 4 were injured, including 2 train operators. The truck driver walked away unscathed, though his truck was a lost cause. This particular collision was totally avoidable. Call a spade a spade. The driver was reckless and demonstrated poor judgment. This turned what was a routine crossing into a near catastrophe. For one thing, trains can't stop as quickly as cars. Trains are difficult to maneuver, and high-speed trains need kilometers to brake. So imagine something being in the way. It's a foregone conclusion. The road user has to yield. Then, the driver assumed he could beat the train. Such a deadly gamble. Luckily, only 4 people were hurt, but it was sheer luck. It could just as easily have been much worse. Number 7. 2014. OHare train crash.
Heading towards OHare Airport train station. The train was driven by 25-year-old Brittany Tishka Haywood.
What happens when there is a blend of exhaustion and tech failure? Yes, you guessed it. It doesn't end well. The Chicago L train is among the Windy City's most recognizable landmarks. 8 colored lines will take you anywhere you need to go. For those flying in and out of Chicago, the blue line takes them right to OHare International Airport. But if they were traveling in late March of 2014, they had to make other plans. It was March 24, 2014, close to 3 a.m. The blue line was making its standard trip to OHare International Airport when something went horribly wrong. Let's just say this time around, the blue line decided to audition for Fast and Furious. The inbound train overran the bumper and nearly took out 2 people standing nearby. The next thing that happened is called How to Turn an Escalator into a Surfboard. Train 141 approaches OHare station. It uses the cross-track to get into the middle lane, where it's supposed to stop and let everyone off. The train was supposed to stop automatically. Rather, it treated the bumper post like a suggestion and went straight up the escalator. The electronic brakes were designed to take effect as soon as the train entered the station. However, there simply wasn't enough room. So, it treated the escalator like a surfboard. There were 2 people at the top of the escalators who had no idea that a 23-mile-per-hour train was barreling right toward them. The train overran the tracks, smashed through the bumping post, and rode up the escalators. The 2 people took off running as the train nearly reached the top. It finally stopped, and then there was a cloud of dust and debris. According to the CTA, there were 50 passengers on the train when it crashed. About 33 people, including the young train operator, were taken to the hospital. She was only 25 years old and had been CTA certified for 60 days. As the story goes, she had been working a lot of overtime and fell asleep at the controls. So, to avoid becoming a viral train wreck, first, respect the sleep deprivation monster. When you need to operate any type of machinery and your eyelids feel like sandbags, speak up. It is way better for the train to be a little late than a runaway train. In the next incident, a driver learned a difficult lesson. You don't beat a train, you just either survive it or don't. Number 6. Norfolk Southern train runs into a vehicle. Norfolk Southern couldn't catch a break in 2023. Derailments, delays, disasters. They were basically the bingo card of rail mishaps. But this one in Warner Robins, Georgia, was not their fault. This one goes to the impatient truck driver who thought he was in Fast and Furious, CSX Drift. It was a display of the timeless dance of human impatience and physics. A truck driver sees a train coming and thinks, "Oh, I can make it," only to learn that the only thing more predictable than a train staying on its tracks is someone underestimating how fast "oh shit" turns into "oh no." On May 10th, 2023, a flatbed carrying a silver sedan got stuck on the crossing near Robins Air Force Base. A few impatient drivers successfully beat the crossing arm, which inspired a truck driver to do the same. As you can imagine, that was a bad idea. Traffic was flowing steadily through the intersection. Amazingly, cars kept coming even as the arm started falling. The truck driver thought he'd make it, but he couldn't speed up in time. It looked like the arm came down between the cab and the silver sedan, effectively sandwiching him in. He tried pulling forward and backing up, but he was stuck. That's when he saw the train and bailed out. The Norfolk Southern train obliterated the cab and dragged the sedan along the track. The steel overhanging nearly fell on the black car behind the flatbed. Meanwhile, the driver bent over and watched the biggest mistake he'd ever made speed by. It looked like someone from the Air Force Base pulled up to make sure he was okay. According to the police chief, the driver was trying to make a left turn when the crossing arms came down and trapped him. He didn't feel like he had enough time to move the truck, so he bailed before the train took him out. Let's just say, when the biggest thing moving at 60 miles per hour is a steel train and not your truck, it's time to get out and rethink your choices. What happens when a couple of tankers politely slide onto the pavement like drunk people at a party? The next accident comes from Sonora, California. Number 5. Freight train derailment in Sonora, California. Picture this. A train hauling lumber and propane derails in a small town, and the biggest casualty is some parked cars. No explosions, no fireballs, just some propane tanks politely sliding onto the pavement like they were looking for parking. A freight train derailed on Friday morning, January 19, 2024, in downtown Sonora, California. It happened at about 9:30 a.m., where the Sierra Northern Railway track crosses South Washington Street at the south end of the Central District. According to the Sonora police, the train was hauling lumber cars and propane tanks. They did not overturn, but two tankers at the rear slid onto the pavement. The railroad runs between Oakdale and the Sierra Pacific Industries sawmill east of Sonora. It moves slowly due to the winding route in the Sierra Nevada foothills. Lumber is one of the top products hauled by rail from Tuolumne County. In addition, propane is shipped there for use in home heating. It's almost disappointing. It's like someone promised a Michael Bay scene and delivered a Lifetime special. The little town of Sonora got off lightly. Let's be real, propane tanks and lumber don't mix well with small town streets. It's like balancing a chainsaw on a beach ball. Eventually, something's gonna tip. Sonora dodged a flaming bullet. But what if the propane had leaked or caught fire? Well, we'd be talking about this in past tense, as in, there used to be a downtown Sonora. Luckily though, by 8:55 p.m. that Friday, traffic was once again moving on South Washington Street, but a portion of Hospital Road remained closed while repairs were made to the roadway and track. City workers responded to the scene with the California Highway Patrol and California Fire. In the aftermath of the event, parked cars were damaged, but there were no injuries. Number 4. Norfolk Southern freight train derailment in 2018 in Pittsburgh. Sometimes, physics likes to remind us who is boss. What happens when a train carrying nearly 5,000 tons derails because of a bad piece of track? In the afternoon of August 5, 2018, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, United States, the Station Square derailment happened. The accident involved a Norfolk Southern manifest freight train, about 57 cars long, traveling at approximately 25 miles per hour at the time of the incident. 10 cars derailed, 3 fell onto the Port Authority of Allegheny County tracks, blocking the line and taking 6 containers with them, while the other 7 and their associated containers remained on the right-of-way. This train politely dumped 10 cars like a bad date, 3 of which thought the light rail tracks looked more inviting. At least they had the decency to avoid casualties. Nothing says minor inconvenience like $1.8 million in damages and a Listerine-filled obstacle course for commuters. No injuries were reported, and the other 47 cars were not damaged. The accident was caught on video. An investigation by the U.S. Federal Railroad Administration, FRA, agreed with an initial assessment by Norfolk Southern Railroad that a defect in the rails caused the accident. A rail inspection performed approximately 3 weeks earlier failed to detect the defect. The investigation faulted Norfolk Southern's contractor, Sperry Rail Service, for failing to detect the defect. The train involved in the incident was heading from New Jersey to Chicago. If your train is longer than some small towns, maybe invest in some extra rail checks. Number 3. Freight train derailment in Australia. When 2 trains decide to tango, leaving 1,800 sleepers. This time, sleepers were the railroad kind, not the exhausted passengers. Authorities had to replace more than 1,800 damaged sleepers and damaged rail after a train crash in Australia on 29 January 2020. A freight train and V-line service collided in the heart of Barnawartha on a Wednesday evening, with containers left among trees after spilling off their wagons. 2 trains crashed. One was full of freight, the other full of people. Luckily, nobody died. This was a miracle, really. The drama unfolded at about 5:45 p.m. with wagons on the northbound cargo train reportedly uncoupling and striking the side of the V-line carriages. A huge noise alerted nearby Barnawartha resident Stephen Sessions to the goods train's woes. The incident caused all services on the line to be suspended. Apparently, some wagons decided they'd had enough and uncoupled themselves mid-journey. Because why stay connected when you can go rogue? They then smacked right into the passenger train like it owed them money. According to the ARTC, following initial assessments, there was a recovery operation involving around 60 workers. They had to recover wagons, components, and containers from the track and move the V-line train and the majority of freight containers. Extreme temperatures at the time didn't help matters either. It was 44 degrees. Because when metal bends and tracks melt, why not throw in a heat wave? If you've ever tried to lift a shipping container in that kind of heat, congrats. You've done more than most gym bros brag about. But what happens when a tram annihilates everything in its path before finally embracing a house like a long-lost lover? Number 2. Tram accident in Goththingberg.
I Göteborg I morse. Vagnen hade fått stanna på grund av ett ledningsbrott och skulle backas ner till Vasagatan för att därifrån ta en annan väg.
On the 12th of March 1992, a tram accident occurred. It would go down as the absolute worst tram accident in the history of Goththingberg. It was the classic, let's just roll this multi-ton death machine backward and hope for the best approach. What started as a simple brake disengagement, a standard procedure, ended with a tram cosplaying as a meteorite. It all began when the part on top of the tram that grabs electricity from overhead wires broke and ripped the wire down. This killed power on a section of the network. When that happens, the trams do the smart thing. They stop themselves. One tram stopped dead in the middle of a busy crossing, making traffic grumpy. The foreman had an idea. Not a great idea, but it's an idea. He remembered that you can manually disengage the brakes, normally for towing or repairs. So the plan was, roll the tram gently backwards, down a slope, with a police escort clearing the way, and then stop it with the emergency brake. Now here's the twist. That emergency brake? It also depends on the very brakes they just turned off, which nobody thought to check. So when the driver went to stop the tram, it was a surprise. Nothing happened. Not one handle worked. The tram just kept going, and then things went from oops to oh no pretty fast. There were no passengers on the tram at this point. A police car that had arrived at the scene would drive in front of the rolling tram with sirens and lights turned on to warn the public. The tram eventually reached a peak speed before it derailed at a crossing, slid across the street on its side, smashed into two cars and a bus stop before it was finally stopped by a house wall, where it caught fire. It was the worst tram accident in Goththingberg's history. 13 dead and 29 seriously injured. The driver survived with minor injuries since he was in the front of the tram. He was back on the job in 21 days. Either Goththingberg had a severe tram driver shortage at the time, or their HR department was really understanding about workplace mishaps. Number 1. The Salsbury rail crash. On 31st October 2021, a spooky day was made spookier when two trains decided to have a very unwelcome meet-cute inside a tunnel near Salsbury. No ghosts were involved. What happened was, in Salisbury, Wiltshire, United Kingdom, the trains collided at Salsbury Tunnel Junction, approximately 1 mile northeast of Salisbury Railway Station. 14 people, including one of the train drivers, were taken to the hospital. The Great Western Railway was cruising through Salisbury Tunnel Junction. Another train, South Western Railway, was approaching the same spot. It blew through signal SY31, which was telling it to stop. The GWR train had just passed through safely. Less than 40 seconds later, boom. The SWR train slammed into it at about 52 miles per hour. The GWR train was going 20 miles per hour, basically slow dancing by comparison. Emergency services, including Wiltshire Police and the British Transport Police, attended the scene, as did the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, who declared a major incident. 14 people went to the hospital, including one of the drivers. Miraculously, no one died. The tunnel? Not so lucky. The accident was the first involving a collision between two moving in-service passenger trains in the United Kingdom since the Ladbroke Grove rail crash on 5th October 1999. Thank you all for joining us as we continue to get up close to some of the most amazing and unbelievable accidents that have taken place with trains. If you found this informative, please like, subscribe, and share. In the comments, let us know what stood out for you. Stay tuned for more stories that reveal hidden truths from around the world.